What's the most NSFW thing you've done in public without anyone realizing it? Before we start, welcome back to our channel. If you're new here, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss an update. Story 1. I used to do exterior patrols as a security guard around a big building in a downtown area. One cold winter day, I took a leak and headed out to make my round. About 20 minutes in, my D hurt really bad. All of a sudden, and I looked down to realize I didn't zip up my fly. My D had flopped out and had been dangling around, slowly freezing. Here I am walking around in a crowd, as a security guard, with my D hanging out for 20 minutes and nobody said anything. That sounds like quite an awkward situation. It's surprising that no one said anything. Maybe they didn't notice, or perhaps they just figured it was too weird to mention. Either way, it must have been a cold shock when he realized what happened. Definitely a memorable moment in his security guard career. Story 2. This was over 30 years ago, and the world has changed significantly since then. I was 18, attending boarding school, where I had a fling with my 23-year-old biology teacher and sports trainer. Living on campus, we had plenty of opportunities to meet up, which made things wildly exciting. I visited her apartment daily, and we'd sneak around campus, including her classroom and the beautiful historic library. I believe we avoided getting caught because we only met after dark. No one seemed to notice us, as we never talked in public during the day. My visits to her apartment seemed plausible since she was my teacher helping me out. I did get all A's in her classes too. Looking back, it was pretty reckless. We both knew it was wrong, and it's wild that we never got caught. Story 3. Back in college, I was hanging out with a guy in his room, but for some reason we decided to go to the common area and watch TV. We were the only ones in there and eventually moved down, kind of made a little space for ourselves between some of the furniture, cuddled up on the floor. Weird, not sure how that even happened, kind of secluded, but also kind of not at all. Horny college brain logic, apparently. I ended up jerking him off out in the open in our little space, not hiding his D under a blanket or anything, despite the fact that a small group had come in and was at the other side of the room, sitting at a table together. I still to this day wonder if they could see or know what was happening. The room also had a lot of windows. It was night but no shades, so anyone walking past outside really could have seen too. Story 4. My girlfriend and I were sharing a paddleboard this summer on a lake with a relatively crowded beach close by. We found ourselves in a quiet little bay and started fooling around. Well, one thing led to another, and we're full on having sex on this paddleboard semi-close to the shore where the reeds were. We were constantly looking around for passers-by, but no one saw us, and we both managed to reach our destination. I highly recommend Missionary on a paddleboard, by the way. One of the hottest things we've ever done. Story 5. I had sex in a movie theater 2 days after getting married. It was a Monday night, so we were the only ones in the theater. My wife wore a slim dress with nothing underneath. The movie started, and the next thing I know, she's on her knees in front of me. Things escalated from there, and she climbed on top to engage in the hot, dirty deed. Only lasted about a minute as I was incredibly turned on. Man, what an experience. Story 6. I had been chatting with this girl for a couple days, and she invited me to come over to her apartment. When I got there, she told me her roommate was home, so we couldn't go up. So instead, we walked around the apartment complex and talked for a while. Then we sat on the sidewalk by the parking lot. She was wearing a skirt and eventually sat in a way that made it very easy for me to see she wasn't wearing panties. I ended up fingering her right there for a while. Story 7. When my wife and I were dating, we used to go for walks at the local waterfront over our lunch breaks as our workplaces were right next to each other. She usually wore skirts, and we would end up shagging in the gazebo behind the casino, right in the open. Not sure why we never got caught. We did it a lot. Story 8. My ex-girlfriend and I were shopping, and I used to join in the changing room when she tried out the new clothes. One day she tried out this dress, and I whispered in her ear to enjoy it silently. I went under the dress and ate her out while she could enjoy the view of that dress in the mirror. I think she liked the dress, so we decided to buy it afterwards. Story 9. Fingering my now ex-GF under her clothes on a bench near a hiking trail while some older people coming up to the bench too. We noticed them only when they started talking like 20 meters away from us and commenting on the view, down a stone quarry on the side of a valley with view over the town below, and ask how we are. Obviously, we stopped instantly. Story 10. I was working in a bakery in my early 20s. Sometimes I got the early morning shifts, which I actually liked because there was still so much time left in the day. But since my shift started at 3 a.m., no buses were scheduled this early, so I took my bike. One time my early morning shift ended at around noon, and I rode my bike home. It was summer, the bakery had been unbearable, but I wore a nice breezy outfit, and riding home felt really refreshing. I was in a good mood and the world seemed to reflect that. I got lots of smiles, guys waved at me, some even out of cars driving by. Turns out I forgot to button up my blouse. I got home, walked past the mirror and realized I was showing more than intended. Story 11. With my wife inside the beach. In the water, we were far away from people, and we were making out. It just escalated, and next thing I had her legs wrapped around me and we went at it slowly. We looked like ducks, calm above water and going ham underwater. That was the most intense orgasm we've ever had. Story 12. Was at an outdoor concert of sorts. A bunch of beers in, and I needed to pee like a racehorse. The venue's restroom situation was abysmal. It's bad when the line for the men's restroom is wrapped around the corner and barely moving. I had reached the point where it was either find a toilet/bush soon or risk pissing myself. But the place was too crowded to even move point A to B easily. So, I grabbed an empty beer cup, stealthily unzipped in the middle of the crowd. We were packed in there so no one could see anything from the waist down, and I just pissed in the cup amongst all those people. Fun fact, urine in a red Solo cup just looks like beer. So, I just carried it through the crowd, trying not to spill, until I just placed it on a ledge and left it there. It's funny how urine can be mistaken for beer in that context. Definitely a clever disguise. Hopefully, the cup found a suitable resting place and didn't end up causing any trouble. Story 13. I joined a co-ed swim team. Had to wear a Speedo. Swam my laps in a cold pool. Got out, joined the team standing lined up on the side of the pool. I just happened to look down. My skin torpedo is poking out the leg of the Speedo. I mean out, my family jewels partly out too. I tucked it in quickly and looked around. No one seemed to notice. Story 14. I fingered a girl until she squirted all over the concrete stairs. We were sitting on a riverfront, with people walking by 5 meters behind us, taking pictures of the city skyline across the river. She wore a long dress, and we casually talked while she rested her legs over mine. Since no one looked awkward or paused their walk longer than necessary, we probably just looked like a freshly loved couple enjoying a conversation. The only thing left was the wet spot, but we left our deposit bottles there, so even that looked kinda like someone had spilled a drink. Story 15. I put a remote-controlled vibrator in my girlfriend and went out to dinner. After dinner I made her come at the table in the restaurant. We weren't in a secluded booth. We were at a table in the middle of the restaurant. Granted it wasn't packed, but there were people nearby and servers walking around. Story 16. Our company's phone room was located in the middle of the building with offices and cubicles surrounding it. Maybe 8 feet by 8 feet in size, the room had a small desk and an office chair on wheels. My coworker was blonde, with small firm breasts, never wore a bra, and she was a nymphomaniac. Plain and simple, almost like clockwork. She comes into my cube and whispers, "I need you to F me." She led me into the phone room, undid my pants, pushed me into the chair, climbed on top, and humped me like a jackhammer. Due to the AC blowing to cool the phone equipment, our moaning was not the concern with being caught by other workers, but rather, it was the damn chair on wheels. She was so active in her motion that the chair rolled all over the room. That made a lot of noise, and I'd also had to drag my feet to prevent us from colliding into the wall, which was shared with the senior VP's office. This went on for about 2 years, but we were never publicly caught. Story 17. I was about 17 to 18, and me and my girlfriend at the time went on a vacation with her family and they had a pool. Well, we didn't have sex, but I put myself inside her and we kind of just walked around the pool and made it look like I was carrying her. The pool was packed with families. When I was younger, I thought I was the man for doing that. Now as an adult with a child, and I was in the pool with my daughter, and people were doing that, I would think how trashy it is. Story 18. Years ago, I was in class one day and someone we knew sat at the back of the class desks next to each other with his girlfriend at the time, and he was rubbing her off. She started moaning and we all knew what they were doing, but he didn't stop, and the teacher didn't do anything but tell him to stop once. We could all see it too. They sat so far back that everyone could see under the desk. Also, one of my mates did the same thing but outside at the area where we ate lunch, right in front of us with his girlfriend at the time. Story 19. I was going out for my morning walk as usual, but this day was not like the rest. It was about 5 a.m., and I was about a mile away from home when I got this feeling of, oh shit, I got to shit. Normally, I can hold it, but I was a mile away. I didn't make it home. I was about 700 feet from home. I shat between two houses near a ditch and prayed to God there wasn't a camera on the side of either house. I went home, showered, waited for sunlight, went back and picked up my shit with a dog bag, as well as scoped out for cameras. I was in the clear. Wasn't my proudest moment. I'm sure I have worse examples, but that was the most recent. That's definitely a wild story, but it sounds like he handled a pretty embarrassing situation as best as he could under the circumstances. At least he took responsibility for it. It's a funny story in hindsight. Even if it wasn't the most dignified moment, it'll make for a memorable anecdote. Story 20. On my last day of high school, a friend of mine had a party. His aunt got really drunk and so did I. Pretty much everybody was trashed. All the adults went to bed except for her, and a bunch of us were in the hot tub. Her and I had been messing around a little bit in secret the whole night, and she gave me a hand job in the hot tub with a couple other people around. I would guarantee they knew, but the absurdity kept everyone quiet about it, I guess. After that night, she blamed us all trying poppers for why she was so reckless. Story 21. A guy I was talking to, and I bought some tickets to a showing of a movie that had been out for a while, so we ended up being the only ones in the theater. I brought a big blanket to cover ourselves with, and some smuggled snacks of course, and the layout had us above the entrance so we could see anyone coming before they could see us, and they were the big recliner seats with low walls between the rows. Given the circumstances, we got pretty bold. We traded blowjobs, then finished out the rest of Deadpool cuddling and playing with each other on top of the blanket, ready to taco it over at us any sign of movement. Good times. And yes, I triple-checked that there was no mess anywhere after. Not that I thought there would be. Spitters are quitters. Story 22. I've got a few stories. Once my ex-girlfriend jerked me off in the back seat of a car after homecoming while my sister drove us home. Another time, I stroked it at my desk at work, 99% sure no one noticed as all my cubicle mates were not there that day and no one else could see over the walls, and I know no one came in. But if anyone saw, it would have been a 6 feet 4 inches coworker that could see over the walls. If he did see it and didn't do anything, what a bro. Hand and blowjobs, sex in parking lots all over the place. Walmart, Taco Bell, church, poorly lit neighborhood street, drive-in theater. Drive-in is the funniest to me because I know for a fact people sitting there watching a movie could definitely see my car rocking and the windows fogging up, but I thought we were being so sneaky. In another instance, my toxic ex-girlfriend and I met up with some friends at a public pool and hot tub, and we snuck off into the stairwell for a quick bang and oral session. Shocked I didn't get caught on this one, because there would have been no avoiding getting seen if someone walked in. Also, finger banged the same chick in the hot tub at night. Got a BJ and a handy to completion under a blanket after prom with at least 3 other couples while watching a movie. This one wasn't in public and the other 3 were all making out, but my ex and I took it a step further. I was wilder in my young age than I thought, but most of the above was while I was still in high school. Stroking it at work was a major lapse in judgment when I was like 22 or 23, but everything else can be chalked up to being a horny kid. Story 23. Walked down to the storm water drain that led into a really nice creek and walked around cross-dressing for a bit, then stripped down naked and jerked off. This creek led along the back of many properties with tall fences, so I was mostly unseen, but if I stood up and walked forward a bit, some houses would see me. Doing this made me learn my new kink. Story 24. Besides the few times my horny teenage self did those things in the back of cars at the store, much later I was bored and was working. While it was a building, I worked with only one other person who at that time was on break. Anyone could walk in. Material handlers could drive up, and often they will barge in. Hard when scrub outfits are a minor kink, and everyone there had to wear them. So, a few attractive women catch my unwitting brain. The second time I was alone and expected to be alone. The first time I came without actually touching as my erect D got between my scrubs, and because I was bored, I would fidget, moving my legs till I found a pleasurable movement. I kept going, jizzing in my scrubs. Thankfully I had a 50-gallon drum of ISO alcohol to remove evidence. Just had to wait on break for dry times. Story 25. Me and my then girlfriend went to watch The Nun in the theater, and got so bored that we started cuddling, as much one can in those horrible seats, and it was chilly in the theater. There was a considerable amount of people in there, but luckily no one was there in the seats adjacent to us, and we kind of sat in the middle seats too with no prior intention of fooling around. Things started to get a little hot and she had my zip open in no time. She jerked me off as I fingered her in return. Took a bit of time for us to finish cause of the rush and anticipation of getting caught. Thankfully both of us kept quiet enough to not attract attention. 17-year-old horny selves were pretty stupid. It was fun, and looking back, it wouldn't have happened if the movie didn't suck. Story 26. With my first girlfriend during college, we had sex in one of the campus common buildings. It was a 5-story building, and there was a concert going on in the green space outside. We went to the 3rd floor bathroom, which was all classrooms and maker spaces and stuff. Heard the occasional person walk by the bathroom outside or going up and down the stairs, but no one came into the restroom while we were in there. Would not do it again, felt really uncomfortable thinking about it afterward. Story 27. In high school, all the athletic students and those participating in after-school clubs would all gather in the cafeteria to socialize until it was time to practice or go to your club. My girlfriend at the time, man I miss her, was a smart, nerdy freak. She loved the hidden finger banging her to orgasm under the table while hanging out with our friend. After she squirted, I would dap all my boys up with the vaginal fluid still on my fingers and hand. They had no clue. Also, her and another girl I used to mess with loved giving and receiving oral anywhere in public, movie theaters, gyms, dressing rooms, random bathrooms, stairwells, parks and trails, in the car, under the blanket around friends, etc. We never got caught despite people being around, and would always leave some body fluid to mark our territory, but not where it would get on someone. Fun times and women. They are doing well last I heard. Story 28. I took my wife bikini shopping before our trip to Miami. She grabbed a few to try on and took me into the fitting room with her. She'd grabbed a white one even though she already had one, but she said she wanted to try it on. Once in the fitting room, she tried it on for the sole purpose of giving me a blowjob. It was intense, sensual, and pleasurable, and the orgasm was explosive. She finished by deep-throating me. She carried tissues in her purse, which I was able to use to help clean up the facial she'd taken. Story 29. Went to a spa with my girlfriend at the time. We went to the public mud baths, not visibly under the water. She sat on my lap facing me, wrapped her legs around me, and rode me slowly enough that no one else that was there could notice. In hindsight, I know that water was hella dirty, but it was all about the rush of how far we could go without getting caught. Story 30. I went to a weird hippie high school, and there was a school trip in the summer where we took a Greyhound bus for over 2 days to visit New Orleans. I guess the bus put out less carbon emissions than flying. One of the nights on the bus, my girlfriend gave me a handy under a blanket. I am positive no one knew. This next one, I'm not so sure. I wasn't on a security camera, but the next year a different girlfriend of mine gave me a blowjob in an elevator. For context, this was in this weird food court at Seattle Center called the Center House, and back in the day after everything would close you could still go into the area super late at night. So, this was at like 1 a.m. and it was completely empty, and we took the elevator down to the basement. Story 31. When I was in high school, I was a part of the marching band. We would have competitions a couple times during the fall, and one time we had one that was about 4 hours away. On the way back it was about 1 a.m. and me and my girlfriend at the time brought a blanket on the bus since it was getting colder and sat next to each other and waited for it to get late so it would be dark and so we could have a quickie. Needless to say, I only got a couple good humps in because it was insanely uncomfortable and were paranoid of being heard, but the riskiness of it was fun. Story 32. Simple, but a girl I was with at the time and myself were on a local lake, swimming, having fun. I knew she was freaky, so I decided to pull her swimsuit to the side, play with her a bit. We ended up full-on sexing with hundreds of people around, while just above chest deep in the lake. I assume no one saw it because the cops weren't called. Miss her for sure. Story 33. Banged my wife on the beach at a national park. It was late at night, so low visibility, but there was another group on the beach some distance away that either didn't know or didn't bother us. We almost got completely naked, until they started waving flashlights around, and we got a lot more worried about being seen, so we left and finished the night at our rental cottage. Story 34. High school proms. We had coach buses take us to and from the venue, both for junior and senior year. My date and I would simply do some hand stuff on the way home. Lights off, buses dark. I'd slide my hand up her dress, she'd slide hers under my jacket, which would conveniently block view of my crotch. Most risky we were willing to get, I'm sure others on those buses have more interesting stories. Fun continued once we got off the bus, but I guess that wasn't in public. Keep a pack of tissues with you for cleanup, and fun is fun. Story 35. Sex in the ocean at Panama City Beach. Spring break, neck-deep water. Standing front to back, her legs spread and curled back around mine. I spent most of the time holding her upright by the breasts with one hand and dialing her down to 0 with the other, while impaling her as each wave passed. If anyone was looking from any of the condo towers, they would have been able to watch everything in the crystal-clear waters with gleaming white sand on the beach and sea floor. Or if anyone had decided to snorkel in the area, no one did. Story 36. When I first met my wife, we had our first time late evening in a public park. We went skinny dipping in a small lake in said park, since none of us had swimwear. We were 16 at the time. It was more stupid than anything else in retrospect, considering all the drunks and junkies hanging around said park after nightfall. We continued to meet up and have sex in all kinds of odd places, because saying our parents disapproved of our relationship would be putting it nice, for the better part of a year, until our daughter was born. We were busted quite a few times too, most infamously when an old lady caught us making out in a church, and, reading the other comment, I do wonder how many times we actually went unnoticed. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe and hit the bell icon so you never miss an update.